Hello, and thanks for joining me for our weekly episode of NCIA Today. I'm your host, Bethany Moore, NCIA's Deputy Director of Communications, checking in with you every week with updates on what's happening in the cannabis industry and here at NCIA. First of all, if you missed the live webinar presentation from earlier this month that took a deeper dive into our newest policy paper called The Medicine of Cannabis, you can head to our website to view the recording of the whole discussion with 6 of the primary authors of the paper, including physicians, veterinarians, and a PhD researcher as they discuss their paper and summarize what your doctor and policymaker needs to know. And now let's go check in with our DC office to hear more about what's happening in the halls of Congress. Specifically, we'll talk about cannabis-related amendments being weighed during the appropriations process, which I'll let our Director of Media Relations, Morgan Fox, explain for us.
It's so great that we actually have things to work on after some relative doldrums early in summer when Congress was kind of stalled out on other projects. But cannabis is really climbing up the priority list and front and center right now. So there's lots going on.
Yeah, definitely. And you spent some time earlier this week monitoring the House Rules Committee discussions on several amendments related to cannabis. So let's talk about that with a quick reminder for our viewers about what the appropriations process is all about.
Well, so basically every year, Congress has to determine what the federal budget is going to be for the following fiscal year. And that's determined through what's called the appropriations process, which is really a series of bills affecting specific areas of the government and specific programs that Congress will submit an initial bill, which we call the base language, and then lawmakers will debate about various amendments, and then the House Rules Committee will determine whether or not those amendments are in order. And if they're ruled in order, then those amendments proceed to be voted on by the full House to determine whether or not they're going to be added into the bill, which they will then vote on after that.
And that's how Schoolhouse Rocks works, right? Okay, so let's get down to the good, the bad, and the ugly here. What's the lay of the land with these amendments so far?
Well, first of all, let me just say that if you don't actually have to watch a House Rules Committee hearing for work, do not do it. It is the worst. But in terms of cannabis, there were a lot of provisions related to cannabis that were baked into the base language of the bill, including the amendment or the provision that protects state legal medical cannabis programs from interference by the Department of Justice. Over the past week, we saw 2 amendments get ruled in order to be voted on that are competing. One, which was introduced by Representatives Blumenauer, McClintock, Norton, and Lee, that would extend those protections to adult use cannabis programs for the next fiscal year. And another introduced by Representative LaMalfa from California that would strip out the protections for medical cannabis in the base language. So those 2 competing bills are going to be voted on in the relatively near future to determine which one will reign supreme in the final language that the House has to vote on. There are a number of other provisions that are being considered as well, most of them related to things like research, federal employment guidelines, law enforcement funding. Particularly, there are a lot of things that still need to get voted on to determine whether they're added into the language related to funding for DEA eradication efforts and a number of other things. One amendment that was ruled or that was ruled in order but then was voted down by the House was one that would basically strip a provision that allows the federal government to provide funding to higher learning institutions that are engaged in cannabis research. So that amendment getting voted down was definitely a positive win. But I think really everybody's eyes are on whether the Blumenauer, McClintock, Norton, Lee amendment will be added to the bill, because it did succeed in getting added to the bill in 2019 and in 2020, but did not make it into the final legislation because they could not find that compromise with the Senate. So fingers crossed that we'll be able to get it across the finish line this year.
Yeah, I remember that. And those medical protections have been in place for many years, but this new adult use level protection would be a bit of a game changer for our industry, at least as far as congressional rulings go, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the Department of Justice has taken a pretty hands-off approach when it comes to targeting state legal cannabis programs, even in adult use states. But that's just a policy. Passing this would put the force of law behind it, at least for the next fiscal year, and it would add a lot of momentum to the standalone efforts to pass descheduling and allow states to determine their own cannabis policies going forward. So, really looking forward to that. And I think it's kind of amazing that people are trying to actually pare back those protections now after they've been approved in every single appropriations round since 2014 and are basically so unanimously supported in Congress that they've been written into the base bill since 2019.
Yeah, absolutely. So this process is still ongoing for a few more weeks now. Is that right?
With any luck, in past years, we've actually found that Congress can't come to an agreement about exactly what the budget should be based on a number of issues, usually not related to cannabis. And so when that happens, then they're forced to enact a continuing resolution, which just means that the current funding levels are continued until Congress can actually agree on a new budget for the next fiscal year.
Sure, sure. The magic of Congress and what happens behind the curtains and how the sausage is made and all that other fun stuff, right?
Oh yeah, it's super fun. I mean, I like it because I'm kind of a policy nerd, but the process can be pretty daunting and can drag on for weeks and weeks and weeks sometimes. So fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for keeping on top of that. And thanks for watching the very, very boring House Appropriations debates on television as well. We'll check in with you really soon and see how things have moved along.
Great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Morgan. Check out Morgan's latest blog on our website to read more and stay up to date. We also heard from our Human Resources Committee last week in a blog article about the importance of mentorship in the cannabis industry and how it can help to cure imposter syndrome. NCIA committee member Kimlee Svensson of Drive Talent says that whether you're a founder, member of senior leadership, or at the beginning of your career within cannabis, my best piece of advice to combat the imposter syndrome is to get a mentor. Read more in this new committee blog. Speaking of NCIA's committees, it's that time of year to submit applications for the next term. If you're a member of NCIA, you're eligible to apply for a seat on one of our 14 industry sector committees, ranging from human resources, banking and financial services, cannabis cultivation, hemp and facilities design, just to name a few. Applications are due by August 15th, so you have just a couple of weeks to get your applications in. These volunteer-driven efforts engage members to drill down in areas of expertise and passion to affect change, provide professional development opportunities, and develop best practices and guidelines that will shape the future of our industry. And it's another great way to get to know and work with your fellow industry peers and thought leaders. So if you're interested, be sure to submit your application today or by no later than August 15th. And remember to subscribe and tune into both of our weekly podcasts, NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice and NCIA's Cannabis Minority Report, which you can catch live on NCIA's Facebook page every Monday morning at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you're a member of NCIA and you'd like to learn more about submitting educational blogs for our readers or being a guest on our weekly podcast, these opportunities are benefits included in your NCIA membership. So please send me an email at bethany@thecannabisindustry.org to get the ball rolling. And finally, if you need a little more excitement, tickets are now on sale for the Midwest Cannabis Business Conference. The event takes place on September 22nd and 23rd in Detroit. Current NCIA members receive discounted or even sometimes free tickets to our trade shows thanks to our retooled membership levels and benefit packages. So head to www.midwestcannabisbusinessconference.com today. You'll also be hearing more about our two conferences we're hosting in December, the Eastern Cannabis Business Conference in Baltimore and the 7th Annual Cannabis Business Summit and Expo in San Francisco. So stay tuned for those updates soon. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram to stay inspired and connected. If you're a member of NCIA, log into NCIA Connect and spark up a conversation with your fellow NCIA members and colleagues today. We'll see you next week.
Working in the cannabis space has been very exciting, and it's, I think, a different level of innovation because the industry itself isn't quite defined. So there's always a new problem to solve or a new way to solve an existing problem, or really reapplying concepts in a very creative way.
There's 25 plus industries inside of this industry with experts from all around. And, for me, there's no other more emerging industry, than cannabis. It's a startup industry entirely made up of startup companies with 2,000 years of user product experience.
I mean, there's so many great things on our horizon, just expansion of new markets and new technology, even outside of the US. Just to know that legal recreational use came online in 2014. So that's not that far back. And so to think that we're here now is pretty exciting and pretty amazing. I'm looking forward to the future.
I'm just really surprised at where we are now, having kind of grown up with the plant in the 70s and early 80s, and seeing what the general kind of social attitude was and where we are now. I'm happy.